Masechet Gittin Daf Lamed Aleph. With this daf, we will complete the third perek. We're going to end off with some agadot about the wind, and we start with the next Mishnah. Hamaniach perot liot mafrish alehen tiruma masrot ma'ot liot mafrish alehen maaser sheni mafrish alehen becheskat shehen kayamin. This Mishnah is continuing the theme of the previous Mishnah, talking about tirumot and masrot. And the previous Mishnah was about whether you can assume that a certain kohen, levi, or ani is still alive, where I made a deal with him beforehand that I would separate Teruma Maaser and designate that it would go to him, be deducted from his loan. That only works if he's still alive, and yes, we can assume he is still alive unless we hear otherwise. Now we're going to talk about not whether that person is alive or not, but a certain pile of grain. So I leave some produce in my field, this particular field over here, and I'm going to use it in the future to separate other grain. And that other grain, I'll be able to say, let's say I'm traveling or something, or I'm in a different field. So the first field I'll call field A. Now I'm in field B. That's far away. And field B, I say, listen, I want to use all the grain here, so I'm going to separate some of the tiruma that I have back in field A will be tiruma for this produce here in field B. And 10% of the produce I have in field B will be separated again from field A. And so I can use that field A stuff for anything that I'm going to be separating in the future. This could be useful if I'm traveling and I don't want to have to separate and then carry it back home and all that. I can do it all at once. We saw yesterday, this is not the ideal way. A chaver would not do this. He would only make sure you'd only separate from grain to other grain that's next to each other. That way he can ensure 100% that it is still in existence. Nevertheless, b'diavad, and in other circumstances, one can do this, and it is valid. And so, therefore, if someone leaves these perot and he's going to take tiruman masrot on them, or how about money? If for Maaser Sheni, this is in the first and second, fourth and fifth years of the Shemitah cycle, he has to take a second Maaser Sheni, which the owner himself can eat in Yerushalayim, or if he lives far, he can redeem it for money. So in this case, he would take some money, take $100, put it in a drawer, a coin, and put it in a drawer in his room. Now, he's going out and he's in the marketplace or wherever he is in another field, field B, and he wants to separate. And so he separates. Maaser Sheni says, okay, you know what? I'm going to redeem this for the coin that I have in my drawer in my room. All that he can do, mafrish alehen, and he can assume that they're still there, even though he hasn't checked for a while. Maybe he left it there 10 days ago. And he doesn't know, is that produce still there? Was it stolen? Did it go bad? Is that coin still there? Did my wife take it and spend it? I'm not sure. I haven't checked on it since then, but you have a chazakah. Status quo, it was there last time I checked, so I can use it to separate tebel. Now, what if in fact it did get lost? Right? Eventually, let's say some days later, I go back to the field A and I see, the grain is not there. I go back to that drawer. The coin is not there. Now what do I do? Rabbi Elazar has, logically, if you wanted to be very strict, we would say, well, I have to take Teruma and Maaser again, because maybe at the time I took it, it wasn't there. But Rabbi Elazar has, and that will be the majority opinion, Rabbi Elazar has a kula, and he says, we only have to worry about, we can assume it was there within 24 hours. We're going to see two interpretations of this 24 hours. Is it 24 hours from the time that I put it there, or from the time that I just checked now? So we'll discuss that further. Next clause, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bishlosha perakim bodkin et hayayin. Now, if I have wine and I set aside some wine, here the wine in this cellar I'm going to use to separate Teruman Maaser from wine that I have in another location, I have to go and check on that wine to make sure it didn't turn into vinegar. If it turned into vinegar, I can't use it. So when you go and check, you should check in the following 3 times during the year. Bekidum shel mose'eh hehag, bosa'at semadar, b'shat kenisat mayim ba boser. when the east wind blows and the last day of Sukkot. We're going to talk. This is how we get into the wind. Also, when the grapes bud, when the buds emerge, and also when the water enters unripe grapes and they fill up and they become ripe. So these are all times that there's a change in the weather. Because of the change of the weather, it could be in those times that's more likely that the wine will turn to vinegar. So that's why, since it's more likely, I have to go and double check: is the wine still good? All right, if it's still good, then I can continue using that wine and separate to the man maser from other wine that I have with that. But I do have to check at those times. Good. My me'ayt la'et. Now, Rabbi Eliezer here, who said we have to check from time to time. Rabbi Elazar, rather. This is Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, the Tana, student of Rabbi Akiva. What does he mean when he says 24 hours? From when? Till when? Rabbi Yochanan amar me'ayt la'et shel bedika. It's from the time that I checked. So let's say I put some grain over there 10 days ago. So I know it was there 10 days ago. And now, let's say everything's done at midnight, so we don't have to worry about it. But it's really it was 3 p.m., it would be 3 p.m. to 3 p.m. on the next day, right? It's the 24-hour periods. So anyway, I put that grain midnight 10 days ago. And now in the meantime, on different days in between, I separated from Tebel to the Man Maser from that pile. And now, on day 10, I go back to see if it's there, and I see it's gone. Now, I don't know when, from day 1 till day 10, when it was gone. Rabbi Yochanan says, from 24 hours since I checked it, that any time before that, I can assume it was still there. In other words, from day 1 until day 8, it was still there, and I checked now on day 10, so I only have to worry about the last 24 hours. If on day 10 I checked at 3 p.m., so 3 p.m. on day 9, anything that I separated from that time on, from day 9 on, is no good, and I have to separate to the man maser again from that grain. But anything that I separated before that, day 8, day 7, day 6, I can assume the grain was still there. So that's what he's saying. Since I left it there, the chazakah is good. Now, it's not going to be good until exactly the time I check. I mean, it's not likely that exactly the minute I checked, that's when all of a sudden someone stole it or went bad. Okay, so when was it stolen? I can assume it was within the last 24 hours. So the chazakah is good from day 1 until through day 8. That's the Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, which would be very lenient. Rabbi Elazar ben Antignos omer mishum Rabbi Elazar be Rabbi Yanai me'ayt la'ayt shel hanacha. But this second opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Antignos says that it's 24 hours since the time I put it there. I put it there on day 1. I can assume it was still there for 24 hours after I put it there. If it was midnight, then midnight 3 p.m. on day 1, it means it was still there 3 p.m. day 2. So if I separated any tebel on day 2, before the 24 hours was up, that's good. I can assume it was still there. But anything I separated after that time, day 3, 4, 5, then is no good. I have to assume that it was gone, and I have to redo it. So this is rather more stringent. All I gain is 1 day. Okay, now we're going to challenge the second opinion here from the language of the Mishnah itself. What's the pshat of the Mishnah? Tenan, im avdu hareze choshesh me'at la'et. Our Mishnah said, according to the Bielazar, if in fact it got lost, I went and checked and now it's gone, so I have to be concerned from 24 hours ago, right? If I say like Rabbi Yochanan, from the time that I checked, that makes sense. I have to be concerned about the last 24 hours, right? From 24 hours ago. But if you say it's from the time that I put it there, 24 hours going forward, it shouldn't say since 24 hours, but rather until 24 hours afterwards. It's counting forwards, not backwards. So it shouldn't say from, it should say to. So therefore the language is against that opinion. Kashya, Rabbi Elazar ben Antigonos' opinion doesn't fit well with the words of the Mishnah. And so we'll conclude that Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation is the Peshat. Good. Now we get to the Rabbi Elazar. This is only a minority opinion. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Okay, Rabbi Elazar ben Pedat, the Amora, is commenting on Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, the Tana, and says Chalukin alav chabarav shel Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar is a minority opinion. His colleagues disagree. Ditnan. We see this in Mishnah in Masechet Mikvaot. Mikveh shenimdad v'nimsa haser kol taharot שנעשו על גביו למפרע בין ברשות היחיד וברשות הרבים טמאות. We have a mikveh for kelim, and we filled it up on day one, and it was definitely good on day one. But now, in the meantime, we are dipping kelim in it the whole time, and now, same thing. On day 10, we checked it, and we see it's less than 40 se'ah. Now, we are not sure when in between did the water level go down. So we find out that it's chased. All the pure vessels that were made pure upon it, right, in it, retroactively are all tameh. In other words, we go all the way back to the beginning. Everything on all 10 days are going to be tameh. And this is true whether it's in a private domain or public domain. For other matters, like whether something touches something tameh, touched something tahor. I'm not sure if it touched or not. If it's in public domain, we are lenient. If it's in private domain, we're strict. That's a general law about if we don't know whether, let's say I walked under a branch, I'm not sure whether that branch was over a corpse or not. In private domain, we're stringent. In public domain, we're lenient. But that does not apply to this case, because here we have a vessel that I know is tameh. The chazakah is that it's tameh. So it doesn't matter even if it's Reshut Harabim. I'm going to assume it's Tameh. The Chazakah continues unless I know that the mikveh was good. Okay, so that's what the Reshut is doing here. Anyway, what do we see here? That we don't use leniency of 24 hours. Rather, you have to assume that, I don't know, I just checked now and it was less than 40 se'ah. So I have no idea when it became when it became less than 40 se'ah. So I have to go back to the beginning, back to the time when I know for sure that it was. Okay, so all these 10 days, everything that I dipped in it, I have to go and dip again. So we see that this is the majority opinion, does not allow the leniency of Rabbi Elazar. Now we say, Peshita de Halukin, Rabbi Elazar ben Pedat, what are you teaching us? Obviously, this is the opinion, it says the words of Rabbi Elazar, so he thinks that only. Everybody knows this Mishnah. What are you teaching us that's new? Because I might have thought that when the Mishnah Mikvaot says anything that you used it for is no good retroactively, maybe retroactively means only within the last 24 hours, but before that it might be good, right? It's possible to interpret that Mishnah that way, so that's why Rabbi Elazar wants to come and teach. No, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua is a minority opinion. Everybody else would say it's no good retroactively all the way back to the beginning. And the last clause of the Mishnah, for wine, you have to make sure to check the wine 3 times. Tana, bikidum shel mosei hag shel tekufa. And the first time that you have to check it is when the east wind blows. This is a common wind that would come in the beginning of the fall. Now, you do it at the end of Sukkot, which is in Tishrei, and it has to be the tkufa, meaning the season. It has to be during the autumn season. In other words, when you're checking, you have to make sure that Sukkot doesn't fall out very early that year. If Sukkot falls out early enough, that it's before September 23rd, that's the autumnal equinox. If it's too early, then it's still the summertime, and so then that would not be the right time to do it. It has to be at the beginning of fall, and so I think in our calendar, I don't think that Sukkot can ever end in our calendar before September 23rd, but in the calendar back then, maybe it could have. So that's what he's adding, that this first check has to be in the beginning of the fall, not in the summer. Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bishlosha Perakim Mochrin et Tevuah. Since we talked about 3 times of the year that you have to do different things, here's some other things that you should do 3 times a year, or that you can do. For 3 times of the year, those are selling seasons for produce. We're going to see who cares when the selling seasons are. Why can't you sell whenever you want? If you own it yourself, you can sell whenever you want. This halakha is going to be relevant to a partnership where I want to sell it now, you want to wait to sell it. I mean, it's a risk because it depends. You want to sell it on a high, and the price keeps going up and down. So you think it's wait, it's going to go up later. I think we should sell it now. So these are the selling the selling times where the markets are open and people are buying a lot. So they're good times to sell, and one partner can force the other to sell during that time. What are the 3 times? Lifnei hazera ubishat hazera bifros haPesach, before sowing time, because then people are going to be buying a lot of produce because they want to use them for seeds, so they're going to need them, and so that's a good time to sell. Also, at the time of sowing, because at that time, since they put all their stuff in the ground, they need produce. They have to buy produce to eat. And also before Pesach, Peros means half, so it could mean half a month, 15 days. Before Pesach, everybody's buying food, grain for the holiday, because they're going to have guests over. They're going to be baking a lot. And so these are all times when the price is likely to be high, and we want it to be available. So these are good times to sell. And 3 times where the market is good for selling wine, and one partner can go and sell the wine even without the other partner's permission. Bifros HaPesach, Bifros HaSeder, Bifros HeHag, before Pesach, before Shavuot, and before Sukkot. Makes sense. When people don't drink wine all the time, they drink a lot more wine on the holidays. And so before each holiday, one partner can go and say, I'm going to sell the wine, even if the other partner says, oh no, the price may go up. And let's say the price does go up, that's okay. The partner who sold it will not have to pay him. If it's at other times and one partner goes ahead and sell it, which is at not a good market time, and then the price goes up, the other partner can say, I didn't give you permission to sell it. You have to pay me the difference now. But these are good market times. Shemen ma'aseret va'elech, oil anytime from Shavuot and on is a proper time to sell the oil. Lemay hilcheta, that's all the braita. We ask, what is this halacha relevant to? It's relevant to partners, as we said. One partner can force the other during all these times. Now, what happens after any of these dates? After these dates, any day is the right time to be sold. In other words, once that this high, this is likely to be a good time, a high price. Once that passes, then go ahead and sell it at other times. Vayhi kiz ruach hashemesh vayman Elohim ruach kadim harishit. And now, since we mentioned wind, we're gonna see some agadot and stories about wind. So this pasuk regarding Yonah, at the end of Yonah, the sun arose and God sent a east wind, harishit, a very strong wind, and it caused Yonah. It was very hot, and he fainted. Now, my harishit, what does the word harishit mean? Amar Rav Yehuda, b'sha'a shemenashevet osa telamim bayam. Harishit is like choresh, to plow. That this wind, when it blows, is very strong, and when it blows over the water, you can see it makes furrows in the sea. As if like it looks like furrows in the sea. That's how strong it is. Amar le Rabba, hainu dichtiv atach hashemesh al rosh Yonah vayit alaf. Rabba says that doesn't make sense, because the continuation of the pasuk is that when that wind came, it was very hot. The sun beat upon the head of Yonah, and he fainted. So it's not a strong wind. A strong wind wouldn't make him hot. Rather, it must be a hot wind. אלא אמר רבא, בשעה שמנשבת משתקת כל הרוחות מפניה, והיינו דכתיב אשר בגדיך חמים בהשקית ארץ מדרום. So rather, Rabba says harishit is not from choresh, a furrow, but rather from cheresh, quiet. This wind is so strong that it quiets the other cool winds that are around, and this wind is only hot, and it overpowers, quiets down all the other cool winds, and that's why it was so hot, and Yonah fainted. And this proof for this is from pasuk in Iyov that says, that Hashem says to Iyov, "Do you know anything? Were you there at creation? Right? Do you know why garments are hot? In other words, on a day that gets very hot." Because Be'ashkit eres midarom. It's because of a south wind that, here's shaket, that quiets down all the other winds. So this is explaining the same thing. Before, up above here, where we're talking about an east wind, kadim, as the east wind, but the same is true for the south wind. I'm explaining this this interpretation here according to the Geonim against Rashi, but I think the Geonim fits more smoothly, that the east wind and the south wind are both similar in that they are hot, and they quiet down the north wind, which is nice and cool. So Amarab Tachlifa Bar Chista, Amarab Chista, Ematai Begadeh Hachamim, Besha Shishkit Eres Midarom, Shebesha Shemenashevet Meshateket Kol Haduchot Mipaneha. Rav Chista explained this pasuk that when is it so hot that even your clothing feels hot? When the south wind comes and makes the other winds, the cool winds, quiet. When it blows, it makes all the other ones quiet. So cheresh and shaket are the same. Okay, Amar Rav Huna, so Rav Huna v'Rav Chista havu yatveh. And then we're going to have two stories about rabbis talking about wind. You might say they're shooting the breeze. Okay, so Rav Huna and Rav Chista are sitting. Chalif v'azil giniba alayhu, and giniba passed by. Amar hadech abre nekum mikameh. So one of these rabbis said we should stand up before him. Tabar Uryanhu, because he's a teacher of Torah. He's a ben Torah, and so he should be respected. Amar leidach mikameh pelga'a nekum, and the other sage says, should we stand up before a quarrelsome person? Giniva used to annoy some people, and so he had a cantankerous personality. He said, even though he's a ben Torah, but because of this personality, no, should we get up and honor him for going and causing machalokot? So he didn't stand. So they're discussing, should we stand, should we not stand? In the meantime, Geniva was walking towards them, and he came right in front of them. Geniva says, what's up? What are you talking about? We're talking about the wind. It's a funny line. Actually, they were talking about Giniba himself. They were talking about whether is he a Talmid Chacham, and we should stand, or is he cantankerous and we should not stand. But they didn't want to say we're talking about you. So they said, we're talking about the wind. And so Geniva jumps right in. Amar lehu, hachi amarav Nechanan barava amarav. I have a tradition about wind in the name of Rav. Arba ruchot menashevot bechol yom. Every day there are 4 different winds that blow. Veruch sefonit menashevet im kolan shemaleken en haolam mitkayem afilu sha'achat. But the northern wind blows together with all of them. And if it were not for the northern wind, the world would not survive even for an hour, right? We saw before already that the east and the south wind are hot and dry, and if they are by themselves, then people will faint. You need some of the cool northern wind to temper down those other winds. The worst, the harshest of all the winds is the southern one. And if not that this angel called Ben Netz would stop the southern wind, would push it away, then it would make the whole world desolate. Shene'emad hami binatcha ya'abed nes yifros kenafav leteman. Another pasuk in Iyov, Hashem is coming to Iyov, says, can you control all these forces in the world? Is it from your wisdom that netz literally means a hawk? But so this angel is like a hawk. Does a hawk soar by your wisdom? Do you know how to do that? Hashem says, I know how to do that. Yov, do you know how? Does it stretch and stretches its wind towards the south? So in Peshat, it's talking about just hawks flying and how they know how to fly south and migrate and all that. But in the Midrash, it's talking about this angel Netz that opens its wings and stops the southern wind from being too strong. And so that's the proof that the southern wind is the worst of all. So that's what Giniba says, oh, you're talking about the wind? I actually do have a chidush about the wind. Good. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak kavu yatveh. Hava chalif azil Rav Nachman bar Yaakov diatib begoharka tedahava paris aleh sarbela techarte. And the last story is about Rav and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. They were sitting together, not to be confused with Rav Nachman bar Yaakov. Okay, Rav Nachman bar Yaakov, according to most historians, he was the son-in-law of the Resh Galuta. Resh Galuta, the exilarch, the head of the Jewish community in Bavel, who was very rich and powerful, and this is his son-in-law. So son-in-law also is going to be wealthy. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak is sitting in a gilded carriage, wearing this fancy green cloak. So you see, he's very rich and powerful and very fancy. And so he's passing by them, probably being carried by people. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak sees that. Rava azar legabe. Rava goes to greet him. Oh, must be. They didn't see who it was inside. He's inside the carriage, but Rava says, seems to be an important person. Let me go and greet the person. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak la azar legabe. Amar dilma me'en asher debedash galutaninhu. Rava sarich lehu ana la sarichna lehu. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, evidently, this is one of the members of the Resh Galuta, right? Which is what it was, in fact. He says Rava needs that protectia, right? He needs to have be in the good graces, so that's why he went and gave honor. I don't need that. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, I'm wealthy enough. I don't need their favors. I'm not going to go and greet him. It's probably some, politician or official, and so I'm just going to stay here. But then, when they saw that it was actually Rav Nachman bar Yaakov, not just any old official from the house of the Resh Galuta, but rather the great sage, who happens to also to be the son-in-law. So, if it's a great sage, so everyone wants to go and see him, and so Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak also went to see who he was, and now Gale Lidra'eh, and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak revealed his arm. It was very, very hot out, and so he picked up his sleeve to try to cool off because it was so hot. So that's the Resh Galuta, right, reveals his arm. Amar Shadya Nashev, and he said, Shadya is blowing today, right? This wind called Shadya. Right, it's very, very hot. Amar Rava Hachi Amar Rav. Now, and again, in the name of Rav, this is now a second tradition about wind in the name of Rav. Ishama pelet bo, Ushmal amar afilu margalit shebayam markevet bo. Rabbi Yochanan amar afilu shichbat zera shebeme'eh, Isha masrachat bo. And so Rav says that this wind is very destructive. It causes women to miscarry. Shemuel says it causes a pearl in the sea to decompose, right? Both are things that are inside or hidden under something else and protected. This wind can go through into the womb and down into the sea and cause destruction. And Rabbi Yochanan says even the seed that's inside a woman's womb will putrefy, so she will not be able to get pregnant. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Okay, Rava said that, and then Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who he was the other sage that was with Rava, he came and added in Ushlotan Mushloshtan Mikra Echad Darshu. All these three opinions, even though they disagree, they're actually all adding one to another. And they all derive their opinions from the same pasuk. Kihu ben achim yafri yavo kadim ruach Adonai mimidbar ole veyebosh mekoro vegomer. Pasuk in Hosea that literally is talking about the tribe of Ephraim. Even though he is fruitful among the reed plants, like he looks like he's having success now, But eventually, an east wind will come, the wind from Hashem coming in the wilderness, and will become dry. His fountain will be dried up, is the continuation. He shall spoil the treasure of all precious vessels. So he's successful now, but he's going to have his downfall. So even though the Peshat is talking about the northern tribes, but we're going to explain this, talking about this Ruach Kadim, the eastern wind, and what it does. Yevosh Mekoro, Zo Mekora Shel Isha. So when this wind comes, this dangerous wind, it will, Yevosh Mekoro, that means Mekora, the womb of a woman, it will cause her to miscarry. Yecharab Ma'ayano Zeshivat Zera Shemei Isha. It will dry up that which is the source, the fountain, the source of life, this male seed that's in the woman. It will dry up, and so that she will not be able to get pregnant. Hu yish se osar kol keli chemda azo margalit shebayam, and it will spoil the treasure of precious vessel. That's the treasure is pearls that are in the sea. Also, it will destroy. Okay, and so Rava said one thing. Rav Yitzchak now followed up with a pasuk, and now Rava adds another point. Amar Rava, Ade sura'ahu dedaike kera'eh, maiki hu ben achim yafri. Amar Rava, afilu shufta bekofina demara rafya. And Rava said, the sages from Surah, they are very precise with verses, and what I'm about to tell you is from them. In other words, you're already, thank you, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, you were able to explain all three opinions here that are derived from different phrases in this pasuk in Hosea, and now I'll even add to that from these very precise interpreters of Pesukim from Surah, because the rest of the Pasuk, the beginning of the Pasuk rather, Kihu ben Achim Yafri, that although he be fruitful among the reed plants, what does that mean? Even Shufta, a handle in the hole of a hoe, will become loose. They're explaining Yafri, which means fruitful, to be switch around the letters. Rafya will be loose. In other words, you have a stick, wooden handle, and you insert it into the hoe with a peg, right? Little peg, and you put it in, and then that's how it stays firm. Most of the year it will stay firm, but this day is so hot, and again, it gets so hot, different materials expand, and now it will just fall out. That's loosened. Rav Yosef Amar afilu sichta bedafna rafya. Rav Yosef said, even a peg hammered into a wall, which is very strong, but on this hot day, everything gets all dried out and it will become loose. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar afilu kanya bechufta rafya. Even more, Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, even a reed woven into a basket becomes loose. Even the reeds that are stuck in there will now expand and change, dry out, and they will become loose. And that's the power of this dry wind. So we ended off with some interesting agadot about the wind, but you see the theme, the flow from before was assumptions that a person still exists, right? Is the husband still alive? Went from there to, is the Kohen Levi Ani still alive? To, is the grain still there? Well, we better check on the grain and the wine. When do we check? Well, we have to make sure to check, especially when there is a strong wind, and that's how we got to this topic, ending off with this strong wind. Handran alach kol get chazakim uberuchim.